Hi everyone, this is BritSimon. So I'm just driving around today. I've got a few things to do, but I thought I'd record a quick video and answer a couple of questions that I've been asked, which are fairly common questions, and also introduce a slightly longer answer to a question that's coming up about the SEAC data. But first of all, just there were 3 questions that came onto the blog today, and they're fairly common questions, right? So, and I answer them a lot. So, don't forget when I say check the FAQ, FAQ. The FAQ is frequently asked questions. So, very often I've realize that a single question is asked over and over again, and so I write up an article about it and I put that in my FAQ. Okay, and so the answer is there ready for you. You just have to go and read it. Okay, and if you do that, it will save me time and you don't have to wait for my answer. So that should be a win-win, right? Okay, so by the way, it's not a great day. California weather in the winter is normally blue skies and cold. When I say cold, never below freezing really where I live, northern California. But today is a little chilly. It's still kind of nice. Okay, so the questions that I've been asked. First question was about a lady who said, I think it was her sister or her niece or something, was a DV selectee and had an accident and is partially disabled on one side of their body. And I got asked a question from someone else about can a blind person be able to get through the medical and be approved for a visa. Okay, so to address that. When you go for the medical, they're not really looking for physical disabilities, and there's a caveat to that, but they're mainly looking for evidence of certain diseases, which if you read my FAQ, my frequently asked questions, you'll see the 4 diseases that they are particularly concerned about. So unless you have one of those diseases, they're not interested if you wear eyeglasses, if you limp on one side because of an accident, or anything like that. Now, being blind, okay, that's a significant disability. Some people would consider it so. But if a blind person is able to be productive and therefore self-supportive, there's no problem with that person getting a visa. Okay, so in the medical, they're going to consider your physical condition towards whether you can support yourself, but they would not discriminate against you because you're blind or because you have a disability on one side of your body. Okay, so that's not really a concern. Now, on the other hand, if your disability makes it so that you can't earn a living, then you become a public charge concern. It becomes a concern about how you're going to support yourself, and that could mean that in the medical, the physician would be required to point out that in his or her opinion, you may be a public charge. You may become a public charge, and that could be a problem in your interview. Okay, so generally speaking, they're looking for these diseases. Generally speaking, they don't care whether you've got a tattoo, whether you wear eyeglasses, whether you're bald. Look, I'm bald. You know, they don't care about those things. It's not interesting to them. It doesn't matter whether you're short, fat, thin. They don't care. What they care about is whether you are going to give American people a disease and whether you can support yourself, whether you'll be a public charge concern. Okay, so that's the sort of long-winded way of saying to this lady that asked me today about her sister or niece or whatever it was, I can't remember now. Okay, so she's had an accident. That doesn't mean that she would be disqualified from receiving a visa. Okay. The next question that is coming up constantly at the moment, around about October, KCC asked more or less every case over a period of a few weeks. They emailed many cases and asked for documents, and when people submitted documents they got an automatic reply that mentions receiving some information within 6 weeks. Okay, you'll hear in 6 weeks. I can't remember the wording, but people keep talking about this 6 weeks thing like the 6 weeks is somehow important, that KCC are giving themselves a deadline of 6 weeks to answer you or to set up your interview or whatever else. That is not true. KCC don't have to abide by the 6 weeks, and so I would say ignore that. It doesn't make any difference. It's not a certainty that your documents will take 6 weeks to process. Some people are finding there is a delay to process their documents where they come from countries where the documentation standards are bad. They could find that it would take a while for those documents to be processed. But in other countries where documentation standards are good and someone provides a birth certificate and passport and these documents are easily verified, then the delay after sending in your documents is days, not 6 weeks. Okay, so in general, ignore the 6 weeks. Forget it. I don't know why. I don't know why KCC even mentioned 6 weeks. It doesn't make any sense. The time varies, but actually, it does make sense to me that they answered that way because they generally have generic answers, which are somewhere in the middle of the reality. It's the same thing when you go on AP. They tell people it can take 90 days. It's a completely stupid timeline. There's nothing magic about 90 days or 60 days or with AP it's done when it's done. And in the same way, the 6 weeks timeline that is given for documents or after documents are submitted, again, just ignore it. What's important is that you follow the standards of documentation that I've detailed in one of my articles. I spent a long time making sure that people really understood how they should name their documents, how they should compile the documents, because KCC have implemented a system that says you can send them the documents, but they must be complete and they must be referenced correctly. If they're not complete, they just ignore the document set like you didn't send it, and it's not their job to check the individual documents. They just say, look, we didn't get a complete set of documents. They won't necessarily tell you what's not complete about them. They're just going to tell you we haven't got your documents, or they're not complete, or whatever. And so it's important you send the complete set of documents, and unless you identify them correctly with your correct case number, as I've set out in an article, they're not going to put those documents on your file, so you basically just wasted your time sending them. So follow the guidelines that I've laid out, and that the email itself that you get from KCC when they ask for the documents, the guidelines are roughly described in there too. I've just expanded upon their guidelines to make it more clear what they're saying. Okay, so yeah, that sort of covers hopefully the 6 weeks thing. Ignore that timeline. And the third and last question I wanted to address in this little bit, just a Q&A session as it were, is about people seeing their case status is at MVC. It doesn't seem to matter how many times I write this out, I still get the same question over and over again about the MVC wording. So when you go on to SEAC, it's obvious that every case starts at a beginning status. The beginning status is nothing. It's you haven't sent in your documents, or if you have, they haven't been processed, or you haven't sent in your DS-260, and therefore you haven't been scheduled. The status that happens immediately after you've got everything and when you're being scheduled is, firstly, you may see a status of in transit. That's when KCC have sent the documents to the embassy, and then once the embassy receives the documents, they'll mark the case as ready. That's when you have been scheduled, the embassy has received your file, and you're ready for interview, and you're just now waiting for the date of your interview. That's on SEAC, right? But before those two statuses, there's another status which is at NVC, and it confuses people because there's some wording under the status that says something about you've got to do 6 things, and you know they'll contact you. I can't remember the wording. Ignore it. Ignore everything it says. It doesn't matter. It's a beginning status. It is meaningless. It doesn't. You don't have to follow any of those instructions. I've written that statement out. I've written that on how to check your SEAC information. I've written it in numerous articles, and I still get the question: what shall I do about MVC? What's the email for MVC? There is nothing you need to do with MVC. They may as well say your starting status is Scooby-Doo, right? Or Bubba Lubba Lubba. It's completely meaningless. It just means that you haven't reached the next stage, okay? So ignore at NVC. Just understand that means that you haven't been scheduled because you haven't sent in your documents, or you haven't sent in your DS-260, or number 3, your case number is not current yet. You can't be scheduled until all 3 of those things are true. Okay? So let me just say it again. Until your case documents and your DS-60 have been processed and your case number is current, you cannot be scheduled for interview. And so the only status that will read on your SEAC system is at MVC. And you can ignore everything about what it says under the status of at MVC. Okay, I'm hoping that kind of puts that question to bed. Oh, little bump here. I live in in Northern California, just outside San Francisco, in a place called Livermore, and it's famous for its wine region. And I'm actually just having to drive through the wine region. We've got about 60 wineries here within 5 minutes, 10 minutes of my house. It's a beautiful area. In the summer it's very warm, but this time of year the hills are green, the clouds are out, it feels wintry. It's kind of nice. It's a little bit different to the rest of the year. I kind of like it. But anyway, pretty soon, hopefully, you'll be in the USA enjoying weather wherever you choose to live. Okay, so that was the point of my video today. I am going to do another video in a few minutes. I'm just going to introduce a separate topic, which is about how to do some analysis on the SEAC data to see, to understand how the cases are scheduled. It'll be mainly excuse me. It'll be mainly in front of the computer. So I'm going to do that in a few minutes, but so I'll end the video here. But anyway, I hope those 3 questions were interesting to you, and I'll try and do these sort of quick videos more often, just as I'm driving to work or driving around, and hopefully they'll be useful. All right, okay, thank you very much. I'll speak to you soon. Bye bye now.